the smog, cause there's a difference when you breathe it in. So don't let the corporate media take you for a spin. This that morning show, they put you in the know. So I hope that you ready. All we do is go, go, go. Yeah, come get your info. You gon' be like, whoa. Having the thought, we bout that, ayy. We in the zone, we out here, yeah. Spitting the fact.
Good morning, everyone. Welcome to Snowy and Rainy Monday. Now, when I say snowy and rainy, you would automatically assume that Kerri's got the rain and I've got the snow. And you would be wrong.
That is absolutely true. I am in Albuquerque, New Mexico, and it is snowing. So, but here it's a good thing because, as we know, most of the Southwest is under a drought. As we've talked about, 45% of the entire nation is in a drought, but it's recognized pronouncedly here. So any bit of moisture falling from the sky is seen as a good thing. And I gotta say, even Republicans here recognize that climate change is real and doesn't rely on your belief system whatsoever. So they have embraced it here, and everybody's got water capture systems, either for plants or, animals, pets, livestock, or they filter it for home use. So it's a good thing.
Yes, if you don't believe in science, try this. Go up to a really tall building and not believe in gravity and jump off.
Right. And that's exactly what it is with this whole climate change. There are no arguments, and it doesn't matter your belief. It just is. And at some point, the rest of the country will wake up to it. I'm just looking at some of the very basic things that they've done here that have alleviated some of the water burden, and it's not being done. One of the things I did notice is there was this development company that I'm not gonna mention their name, but they wanted to build this huge gated community with 2 golf courses up in the mountains. And Republicans and Democrats joined forces to stop them, to keep them from getting a permit to do this. Because even in a drought-stricken state, they want to do this large grassy golf course, not just 1, but 2. And everybody's like, no, you're not going to exploit our resources, our limited resources for this development project. So I was really encouraged by seeing that. Oh my God, there are Republicans with common sense. Yay! I'm happy to see it.
And isn't it funny, that probably the reason they wanted to put in 2 golf courses, because it's unfair to make the people on the far side of the community walk all the way across the community to golf.
Well, and how dare they have to wait for a tee time, right? I mean, we can certainly make it reasonable for people to wait 6 to 10 hours to cast a vote in a democracy, but you cannot make people wait that extra hour for a reasonable tee time. They've got things to do.
Yes, well, plus the fact the longer that you're waiting at the first tee to tee off, the more chances somebody's going to see you that in the ridiculous golfing outfit you're wearing.
Oh, absolutely. And drones are a thing. Drones with cameras. We'll see you. We'll see you driving in there. No problem. So this, I think, is, for me, somebody who's come from Chicago that is allegedly a blue state. It's not. To a state that's supposedly red, but run by a Democratic governor who is doing phenomenal things here under COVID, under the challenges with climate change, all of these other things. I got to say, I've been pleasantly surprised. So I think it goes to the lesson that just because someone's wearing a blue jumpsuit doesn't necessarily make them a Democrat or a liberal. Like, for example, Governor Pritzker in Illinois is still facing some tax evasion charges so for those of you not familiar, during the election, it came out that he took one of his mansions, had a plumber go in and remove all the toilets from that mansion. And what that does under Illinois tax law, It says that that building is no longer habitable and it gives you a reduced tax rate. So once his assessment was done, he moved all the toilets back to the mansion, right? And that's the governor of Illinois. And while we're pointing fingers at Trump for doing similar things, nobody's talking about the governor of Illinois. And oh, by the way, Illinois has a long history of 4 or 5 governors ending up in prison. So let's keep all of this in mind as we talk about vote shaming this morning. Just because somebody is for something doesn't necessarily mean they agree with you on everything. And nor should you have to deal with people manipulating your right to vote. And let's be honest, especially here in America, you have only one thing that has any value, and it's not your life and it's not your taxes, it's your vote. That's it. That is all you have left. And in some cases, that doesn't even count. So we're going to talk about how to protect that precious vote, how to exercise that precious vote, and give you some very real examples of people who want you to not exercise your right to vote. So yeah, I'm ready to get started. Andy, I know you have some very deep opinions about what goes on here in the United States with
Really?
Vote shaming.
Moi?
No, yes.
Well, I think a lot of it had to do with the fact that you couldn't go to baseball games. So America needed to find a new pastime, and it's vote shaming.
Well, it's been cultivated over many elections. And I think it's just refined to a point where it's at a fever pitch now. I love politics. I love discussion about religion, all of these things. Even I am tired. I'm just so tired because I keep seeing things. So one example that I wanted to bring up, an anecdotal story, but before the primary in this particular election, I had the opportunity to go with a very good friend of mine down into the city of Chicago to meet with Democrats and Bernie delegates, things like this. One of the conversations we had was with a Bernie delegate who had been elected to office as a Bernie delegate in the city of Chicago. This was a very nice, very intelligent advocate, activist who happened to be a Black man. So we loved seeing the representation in an elected office. This gentleman was serving as a PC. And after this particular event ended, we had an opportunity to speak to this gentleman, and he admitted that he was not going to vote for Bernie and not going to stump for Bernie during the Illinois primary, that he was all in for Warren. And I remember being shocked by that, because there's that old phrase, be cool with the ones you came in with, right? If this is the platform and the policies that got you into office, why would you suddenly turn? And it became very evident because there was a long-serving Democratic congressman in this room, and I'll just name him Bobby Rush, who glanced at the PC that we were talking to, because we were clearly Bernie supporters. He glanced at this gentleman, they exchanged a look, and right there, my friend and I were like, we understand. So part of vote shaming is in the political arena, in that if somebody like Bobby Rush puts his arm around you and says, there's a place for you here in Illinois' Democratic Party, the next sentence is, if you will but play ball, toe the line, that sort of thing. So we understood right away, without them admitting to it, what had actually happened. There was some coercion and a quid pro quo and all of this sort of thing that was happening in the Chicago Democratic Party on behalf of Warren for the primary. So we knew that Warren was a spoiler for Bernie from the get-go. And how they were using the PCs, Bernie elected PCs and delegates, to make that happen, to stop Bernie. So that's one very clear example of vote shaming. So while for our longtime viewers, good morning. For others, if you have a story you want to tell, drop it in the chat. It's on our Facebook, on our Twitter. We will see most of those. if you're on our actual page. And I'd be happy to share your story with everyone else who's watching. So weigh in, tell us where you think we're right, where we're not. And we also welcome all of our MAGA neighbors, because election or no election, we still got to live together. So there's that. But one of the other clear examples that I thought was kind of funny that came out recently. So we've heard Trump and Republicans who every election like to cast doubt. They cast doubt about the electoral process, whether, there's always the old adage that, particularly in Chicago, that your dead relatives vote. And I got to tell you that doesn't happen. And these are the words and allegations spoken by people who don't understand how the election process works when it comes to vetting all of the poll books, who have never worked as election volunteers, who have never been poll watchers, because it is incredibly difficult for election fraud to happen. It is incredibly rare for voter fraud to happen. And in most cases, I would say, I don't have the exact statistics, but I know it's well over 99%. It's all good. And those people who are trying to manipulate it, or, they admit to testing the system, they get caught. And they're usually regular folks who believe the lies from politicians and try to test the system. And now they face federal charges, right? We see it over and over and over again. Well, one of the participants who stepped up, besides, most of the Trump administration, former Governor Mike Huckabee sent this tweet that had Twitter kind of light up, and, took him for a walk, dog walked his ass for this bullshit tweet. And what he said was, he stood in the rain for an hour to early vote today, and you can see the picture of him wearing "I voted" sticker. And I filled in my stack of mail-in ballots and then voted the ballots of my deceased parents and grandparents. And it goes on and on, kind of tongue-in-cheek, to talk about how he's rigging the vote with multiple mail-in ballots. Okay, let's just put this aside here. First off, mail-in ballots has been a thing for our military members and our foreign service officers and their families who have been serving overseas for generations.
And the state of Oregon.
Right, exactly. So Oregon has, 98% vote. Nobody goes to a polling place in Oregon anymore. It works just fine. It's worked just fine for our veterans. So are we now calling into question every service member who voted in every election and saying that they have committed voter fraud? No, of course not. But that's not the critical thinking that people like Mike Huckabee want you to engage in. They want you just to believe, take what they say at face value, and yeah, there's election fraud, because this is what people do when they know they have a guilty conscience and they're worried about the outcome of that vote. So that's exactly what Trump and Mike Huckabee and others are doing, right? So what I thought was interesting is, of course, Mike Huckabee wanted to get attention, and boy, did he get it. So what happened was, a member of the Federal Elections Commission, and this is, I'm going to butcher her last name, Ellen Weintraub. She is she's a member of the Federal Election Commission. I don't know if she's the chair, but she saw his tweet and she was really concerned, because even making a statement like that as a former governor, that is illegal. You cannot do that. And for Mike Huckabee even to be joking about filling out improper ballots and voting on behalf of deceased relatives, can't do that. It's the same thing when you go into your polling place and taking a picture of your ballot. You can't do that. And all of these rules and laws are designed to protect you as a voter from vote shaming, right? So even when you pull records as a candidate to run for office, it will tell you in some states if it's a partisan registration. If you register as a Democrat, you register as a Republican, you can get the data about which ballot somebody pulled, whether it's Republican or Democrat. But it doesn't tell you who they voted for. So in this last primary, if you wanted to vote for Bernie Sanders or you wanted to vote for Elizabeth Warren, it would show that you pulled a D primary ballot, but not who you voted for. And the reason for that is to protect you as a voter from being harassed, marginalized, and disenfranchised from your democratic process, right?
And it's true at what you're saying, but it's also not a narrative that anybody, is hearing from any normal mainstream sources, right? Because they don't want you to know that the system is fairly sound in that direction. They want you to think that, oh, this is completely corrupt. And this leads back to, why would you think that somebody like Mike Huckabee would post something like that, even if it's just a joke or whatever, right? And this is all part and parcel with what the Republicans have been saying for the last month or so about mail-in ballots, or longer, right? That you can't trust them. They're totally corruptible, and it's set up that way because it gives Trump a reason to invalidate the election, right? At least in his mind, right? There's obviously, checks and balances in the system that will push back on that. But Trump says that, oh, well, look at Mike Huckabee. He's saying that he can vote 5 times. The mail-in ballots are this is bullshit. We shouldn't allow them. This is corruption from the left, right? From the socialist party of Biden and Harris.
Which is a hilarious take on it, right? The Socialist Party of Biden. And so as a rebuttal, Biden comes out almost daily now saying, I beat the socialists. Look at my record. I'm not a socialist. And he's not. He's a neoliberal policy wonk. So he is a no. But the irony is, we complained about it last week. These are the same people who are more than happy to take socialized medicine and healthcare. They're more than happy to take all the benefits that go with it on our dime, while at the same time calling, all of progressive policy socialism when they're not. So I just thought it ironic that, okay, so this is why we have celebrities come out with endorsements. This is why endorsements happen at all, because we, at our core, are herd animals, HERD animals. And so when you have someone like Mike Huckabee, who was a darling of the neocons and was a former governor, and he comes out and starts to poke at our electoral process, people believe him, right? Let's look at the whole QAnon thing, that people believe that. They believe Trump when he says he's a billionaire. They believe everything he says because it makes them more comfortable in their own ideology. So Mike Huckabee is actually, you're right, Andy, he's paving the way to call all election results, except the ones they like. The other results they don't like, they'll call those into question.
Absolutely. That's normal that you discredit the decisions that go against you, and you reinforce the ones that go for you. Right? That's I think that's human nature as well, but it's magnified in the American political system because of the corruption.
Yeah, and that's what this is. This is an example of corruption. It's not a joke. It's not a game. And I think when you have an FEC member literally come out of the woodwork and go, oh, this is not okay, it's pretty telling that you have done something completely wrong. Now, will he be held accountable? Will he be censured? Doubt it. Seems like very few actually get held accountable. But wait, we do have some examples here. So, Andy, let's go to the next one. The next one is fun. So is this, I just forgot the order. Was this Kansas?
Yes.
All right, Kansas. This one is fun. So when the headlines come out, it usually takes a year or two for the comeuppance to happen. And in Kansas, you have this gentleman who decided to run for office, Mr. Watkins, Mr. Watkins didn't want to be labeled a carpetbagger, so he put as his mailing address, when you file as a candidate, you have to put your mailing address in there. And usually, I didn't check Kansas, but usually you must live in the district you run for. Not always. You see Congress people like McGrath who don't live in the district. Like I could literally run for Senate in Illinois, even if I live in Utah or New Mexico or whatever else. You don't necessarily have to live in the district. Well, he apparently didn't, and he used a PO box at a UPS store. Yeah, UPS store. He rented a PO box at a UPS store and used the UPS store's address as his own. That's fraud. And he committed this act of fraud on his own candidate filing. That's a felony. You can't do that. So the entire time he's going through his campaign, you know, he's uttering the same GOP rhetoric about blah blah blah, Democrats blah blah blah. At the same time, he himself was committing fraud. So nobody, very few, the very rare person will file to run for office and not at least have a basic conversation with the party that best aligns to their ideology. So in this case, Mr. Watkins, he had a relationship with the Republican Party, either ignored their advice or didn't understand or whatever. We'll give him the benefit of the doubt. He's a complete moron, didn't ask the question, filled out the paperwork and just went on. Well, now he's up on felony charges. So this is another example of election fraud that we need to talk about, because here is somebody who is literally committing an act of fraud as a candidate running for office while he's pointing fingers at other people. This also is vote shaming, in my opinion, because as a candidate, if you can't get your shit together, all your shits in one place and get it right while you're pointing fingers at people of another political persuasion, that's vote shaming. It really is. And for the people who consider themselves in the Republican Party or of that persuasion, we see it time and time again. I see it with Democrats, neoliberals, neocons. It's okay if it happens to somebody on my team. I'm totally going to excuse it. But if it's somebody on the other side, then it's wrong. And I think Trump has highlighted that. When we point fingers at Trump for violating the Emoluments Clause, for all of these things, including kids in cages, right? The only thing that his policy changed from the Obama administration was separating children. That was it. The cages were there. Where were we? We weren't sending more lawyers down. We weren't sending more judges down. We totally ignored it under Obama. But when Trump did it, and then he ratcheted it up to this more inhumane policy, now we want to get involved. Well, the same thing's happening in Kansas with the Republican Party. Not a good look. So
well, and it's all, you know, renaissance of the time too, right? Because of Trump's election in 2016. His corruption was out there for all to see, and it didn't make a difference, right? There was any politician before that stepping outside the boundaries of what is considered presidential was automatically a disqualifier, right? The game that Trump changed was that he was all those things, but he didn't care. And the people that were supporting him didn't care either, right? So you're not turning your base. You're not shaming them into, oh, well, he's just a bad guy, right? And so that didn't happen. Well, the offshoot of that is that now you have all these Republican politicians that say, well, look, apparently you can get away with anything now. You can do it in plain sight. And nobody ever gets caught. Nobody ever does jail time. Well, it's not the case. It takes a while for the justice system to get their ducks in a row and for people to actually hear the truth outside of the normal way that mainstream media sends things out. But eventually the truth does come out, and then these guys get dick slapped for it because, what were you thinking? You're not Trump.
Yeah, right, exactly. And it's very telling, right? And I think this is why we are so ill-equipped, or at least our leadership is so ill-equipped to resist. It's just the regular folk on the street who are doing the actual resisting, because either number one, they don't care, or number two, they're still trying to have this logical argument with an emotional opposition, right? And let's be clear, as you said, Andy, they don't care. They don't care about any of these sorts of things. They care mostly about what's going on with Trump and his policies that benefit them. And I saw this in my cross-country tour. If it was a cattle rancher, they're guaranteed there was a Trump sign out there because of what he has done for them in opening up China beef to them so that they can sell in China. But if it was someone else who wasn't reliant on a 401k or stock price, there was no Trump sign. So, and this is, how does it affect me? Does he hate the same people I hate? That type of thing. So, yeah, I agree with you. They 100% do not care, and it's completely an argument on emotion, which can't really do. So, all right, Andy, you want to go to Texas or California next?
Let's go to California.
All right, California. So this one has come up in corporate media, but in a weird kind of way, because so in this whole push for mail-in ballots, you need to have a place to put them. So what California did is, if you don't want to go to your election board, or if you don't want to go to your polling place in person, you could mail them in or drop them in a ballot box. And these are supposed to be secure, convenient locations. Well, the Republicans in California decided to create their own ballot boxes, make them look official. And in fact, the original ones even had the official looking sticker, right? So it looked like it was something from your Board of Elections. And people were using these, thinking that I have voted, I've turned in my ballot, and it will now be counted. No. So it came out that they had a number of these ballot boxes around, and they're all fraudulent, right? So my initial thought on this is, okay, if you are not part and parcel to this kind of corruption and fraud, when it doesn't matter where you fall on the political spectrum, and the Democratic Party from Newsom on down to the Secretary of State, if they're wringing their hands about how to hold people accountable, but those boxes are still sitting there, I said I would look up what the fine and liability would be to go and get that ballot box. I'd be like, would it be worth it to me? Because it's not official. It's just a box. Would it be worth it to me to go ahead and take that box and pick it up and stop it? So I don't know, Andy, what's your take on it?
Well, the other thing is, if it's just something that's been placed out in the public, it doesn't have any protection, as any official entity. Who's to say you can't just go into it, remove the ballots, and go put them in an official box? Right?
Well, and that was my point. Go in there with a bunch of stamps. Get a book of stamps and put stamps on them and drop them in the post box. So is that a felony? And
well, how can it be? It's not. These things are just placed in the public, right? I mean, they're not official. They're not government affiliated. They're just placed on street corners. There's nothing to say that it's illegal to go into them, right?
Yeah, so, it's not a mailbox, so it's not mail tampering. And if I put a ballot into a box thinking that it was official and the box itself is not, then the person who actually committed the mail fraud, the voting fraud, was the person who owned the box. But sure, if I break into that box and mail that stuff, then I don't know. I don't know what the charges would have been, but I'm one of those people that, fuck it, I've got nothing to lose. Put me up on charges. Let's have that conversation. You're either going to drop those charges or you're going to make an example of me, and we are going to talk about what is and is not acceptable in the state of California.
Well, and the other thing is that these boxes were deemed judiciously to be illegal, and the GOP in California has been told to remove them, right? So what possibly could they say if you went in simply to remove these ballots in something that's already been deemed illegal and mail them to the proper place, right? That's what could you possibly be charged with? You can't.
Yeah, it did, and I was looking to see what it was. So in this particular article, the Attorney General is still trying to piece together what those charges are, right? So if the people at the top who are responsible for upholding the law don't know, I don't know. But then we always run the risk because we know that there's a dual justice system, right? So there's a system for political parties, and then as an individual, I would be pretty certain that they would throw the book at me as an individual, because how could I possibly defend myself? I don't have $100,000 to wage a defense, and I would be stuck. So they could do anything that they wanted to do. Chelsea Manning comes to mind there. So in defense of democracy, you become the Rosa Parks of the ballot box in this case, but who's going to defend you? Whereas the Republicans obviously have quite a number of attorneys on staff. Democrats have quite a number of attorneys on staff. So who is left in the lurch here? Who is being vote shamed here? It's the people of California, regardless of who they were trying to vote for. They were just trying to do their thing. This is their right, and you have people taking advantage of that. So this, to me, is yet another example of vote shaming. How dare you want to cast a mail-in ballot and use an official mail ballot drop box, right? That's basically what Republicans are saying. They don't care about your rights, your vote. And, here's the Attorney General, who, for whatever reason, doesn't know if this is wrong and what the charges would be. So to me, that's a major problem. So Texas, let's move on to Texas real quick, because same thing's happening in Texas. So in Texas, they limited those ballot boxes. So the governor there, who is a Republican, apparently hates democracy, and wanted those convenient ballot drop boxes limited to just one in Houston. And they was pushed back, and now you get one per county. So you're still going to have to drive 2 or 3 hours. It's a disability issue. So if you're not able to drive and you don't have someone to drive you, you're screwed. I think you can still put a stamp on it and mail it and get it there. So that is the way to go in Texas. But what this did is it had the effect of all of this was playing out very publicly in Texas about what is and is not okay, and are mail-ins okay, but absentees aren't. By the way, they're the same thing. So don't let the terminology or the nuance throw you off here. Mail-in ballots and absentees are the same thing. So all of the soldiers, all of the military personnel, everybody who is out of state, like Trump himself, voted absentee in Florida in a mail-in ballot. So all of this conversation in Texas had the opposite effect of what Republicans were hoping for. You now have millions of people who have cast early votes, either in person or by mail. And the more votes, we know, we've talked about it, the more votes you have, the sheer volume, you get to a tipping point where no amount of election interference in all of these games they play matters. That's how you defeat these little shenanigans and things, is sheer volume of voters. And in Texas, they have millions who've gone out and voted. So no indication yet as to which way they went, whether they went for Trump or Biden or Howie or Joe Jurgensen, but they're voting. And in my mind, that's a good thing, right? So I've mentioned it before, when you have a war-torn country and they can get an 80% turnout, whereas in this country we can't. to me, that in and of itself is vote shaming, and that I think is the result of having poor policy, poor candidates, and not really speaking to the needs of the people themselves.
Oh, absolutely, absolutely, and that's been the same since. That's been a steady decline since Reagan in the 80s, right? It's the real reason that people voted for Trump, is to try to get rid of this centrist neoliberalist uh, uh, scourge on the U.S. that has just completely destroyed life for most of the middle class and working class people in the United States, right? And that's a horrible thing. And we talk about all of this stuff, including with the voter shaming. And when I talk about that, you see a lot of it in the social media aspect of this, right? And places like Facebook and Twitter, especially, where you have these quote unquote progressives that are basically shell shocked because they've been blamed for everything ever since 2016. Right? You're responsible for Trump, right? Because you didn't vote for Hillary. And you're turning around now and we're getting the exact same thing about Biden. You have all of these progressive groups that did everything they possibly could for Bernie Sanders, right? And Bernie Sanders was such a good candidate that they although they couldn't attack him, they started to attack his followers. Right? It was just so ludicrous, this whole thing, right? So now they were able to get their candidate, Biden, to beat Sanders, who continues to stump for Biden, right, on the campaign
Yeah, I haven't
trail.
seen Elizabeth Warren or any of the others on the campaign trail for Biden, which is kind of puzzling to me, right? All those people who attended the Stop Sanders breakfast should be at a Stop Trump breakfast and putting their money where their mouth is, or phone banking, or doing all of these sorts of things.
Well, plus you rarely see Biden. You know?
That's not necessarily a bad thing, right? If I had a candidate who kept telling people to vote for the other guy, I would keep him home too. So,
yeah, it's just ridiculous, and it's so you get these people that come on social media and are other platforms that I belong to that are progressive in nature. That's trying to teach people about the narrative of MMT and why that matters, and explain to people why neoliberalism is destroying, a number of countries around the world.
right.
And then you get these centrist supporting Biden people come into these progressive sites and then tell them, oh, I'm so tired of the progressives whining about Bernie, right?
But we're not whining about Bernie. Bernie was just a person. We advocate for the policies, and I think so we need to revive the video that Jimmy did, Vote Blue No Matter Who, because she talked extensively about the data that disproved that Bernie people or a third party vote ushered in Trump, because none of that's true. But that is not the point, right? They don't care about the data that disproves the narrative. They just want to cudgel to beat people now. And that is what they're doing. So it has nothing to do with logic or data. Again, it's emotional. And this is why I know I make people upset, but I call them blue MAGA. Because when you are arguing against logic and you're against data and you're using an emotional weapon, you are no different than a Trump MAGA supporter. And that is the basic premise, right? So this morning I saw a conversation about two people I deeply respect, very well known in advocacy, and both supporters of Medicare for All. And what I saw was one of these people all in for Biden out of fear for Trump. And I get that. I absolutely get that. And they were, in fact, vote shaming this other individual because this person was leaning towards green. And it struck me as odd because you are willing now to have a backbone to shame and berate your colleague on the left. Where were you when we were trying to fight a Democrat who was literally poisoning people and had policies that were killing brown and black people in Illinois? That person was absent and silent. But yet for the Biden thing, because it's big and it's in your face and networks are telling you about how bad it is and all of these things that you might lose, you personally, now you're upset. So it just struck me as odd that why are you now attacking your colleague when you weren't fighting with them on this other issue? And is this another case of maybe somebody doesn't understand the Electoral College? So for example, this particular person who wants to vote green in Illinois is not going to change the Electoral College outcome in any way, shape, or form. So why can't they vote green? Why couldn't they vote for Joe Jurgensen if they really wanted to? I mean, I personally would try and talk them out of that, but this is what I mean about the lack of understanding, lack of logic, lack of data. Before you are tempted to vote shame someone, go look at the Electoral College vote tallies. Go look at the Supreme Court ruling on faithless electors and what happens if they vote against what their state wants. Does your state partition votes, or is it an all or nothing type of deal? So if you understand that, then you will start to understand why your vote shaming actually has the opposite and negative effect, right? So you are literally telling somebody to stay home, even though the words you are using is a vote shaming tactic to vote for your candidate. Give me a policy that doesn't start with the other candidate's name, right? So if you're a Biden supporter, tell me why I should support your candidate without using the other candidate. Give me a policy that's going to affect my family, anything to do with my economics, help me survive, help me get access to healthcare. Tell me what is actually going to happen if I support your candidate. That's the way to go.
Right, exactly. And you know, and I talked about this on Friday about this conversation that I was getting into on Facebook with this person that was sick and tired of progressives whining, and how can you say that Biden is at least as bad as Trump, if not worse, when Trump is locking kids in cages, you know, and doing the full, you know, pearl clutching, oh my goodness, orange man bad thing, right? Well, if those are the reasons why you're against Trump, then it might possibly be that you're coming in proficient. Oh, you all right? It might
cat intrusion.
a cat problem. Oh,
yes.
Call the exterminator.
Yeah, infested with cats.
But it might be that your problem with Trump has nothing to do with a number of different people's problems with the United States policies about Medicare, like healthcare and student debt, and you know, fossil fuel industry and everything else, that perhaps you're coming at this problem from a position of privilege where those things don't bother you because you're doing okay.
Right. Now, if I was working with Pelosi, because I have the marketing background here, what I would suggest is, okay, Nancy, I get that you just want to be performative and you really don't want to rock the boat. You really don't want to do anything of substance. But here's what I would do. I would gather together a bunch of attorneys, maybe even some judges, and put them on a big bus with your name on it and send them to the border. And I would make a show of actually helping those kids in cages even though you've already sent them toothpaste. Let's send them some lawyers. And even if those lawyers just have lunch down in, some border town and then turn around and come back, at least we have good video footage of you actually doing something that appears meaningful, right? At what point do Democrats have culpability in doing nothing? We saw 4 of the progressives push against the budget that gave money to Trump to expand those kids in cages and expand the payments we were giving to Mexico for the atrocities that are happening on the other side of the border on our behalf. And what did Pelosi do? She vote shamed those people, right? So this is something that the neoliberals need to address before they want to open their mouths or fix their lips to vote shame anybody. Prove to me that I am not out here resisting on my own. Prove to me that they're doing it. And so far, we're seeing very little of it. And we talked about it with Zephyr Teachout on Monday or last week, when she was outlining all of the things that Democrats could do to stall the Amy Barrett vote. They are choosing not to. And I hate to keep reminding people who are freaking their shit out about that vote. Hey, every one of those Democrats, those dinos that are siding with Republicans, every one of them had a primary challenger and you didn't support them. In fact, you laughed at us when we tried to get them out of office so that things like this would not happen. Elections matter. Vote shaming doesn't work, right? So
no, and we have to come to an understanding of why that occurs, right? And what's the motivation behind it. It's not that you're coming from a better place. It's that you're in a good place and you want to repeat that narrative so that you don't lose what you have, right? Even if the rest of the country is going to hell in a handbasket, as long as you're okay, well, then that's good, right?
Right.
And that's the American exceptionalism that just makes people from other countries look at the U.S. and say, good Lord, what's wrong with those people, right? How can, it's insane.
Well, and we lack the courage of our convictions, right? So when going back to California and these fake ballot boxes, I'm like, why are they still there? Right? Why hasn't somebody gone to pick them up? If I was in California, you bet your ass I'd be picking them up, right? Why in Texas and in Georgia and in Alabama and all of these other states, why aren't the county chairs of the Democratic Party putting their bodies on the line for this? Rather than, you can't even get a soundbite or a quote in a paper, but they themselves are not on the front line. Isn't that their job? I would think that's your job, not the whining and dining that happens behind the scenes, but prove that you are about these policies and you are for people and you support democracy, and hold them accountable with backbone, not just title. But I guess I'm old-fashioned that way.
Well, look at the story that's just come out about the Goldman Sachs, right? Once again, bad acting by the banksters, right? Mm-hmm. There's a fine of, what was it? Something in the neighborhood of $2.9 billion that Goldman Sachs has to pay because there was a Congress fund that was earmarked for another country to help them. And bad actors at Goldman Sachs siphoned a certain amount of money off of that to make purchases like houses and cars and boats and land, right? And this just happened, right? So they were, they were guilty, and the Goldman Sachs Corporation has to pay a fine. But once again, who's doing jail time?
Again, no, nobody's going to jail. And this is part of what I'm talking about, the tepid timidity of our leadership, not just in Congress, but at a local level, right? I want to see you with the courage of your convictions on the front line with us.
Right. And the whole thing is, if you understand MMT, you know that the reason that the government fines them is not because, oh, now we get however much money the fine was to spend on the people or for whatever reason we want to. That fine is basically just like a tax, right? It just disappears. So, it's not a big deal because Goldman Sachs knows that, they've been the recipient of bailouts and money and subsidies and forever and ever, and that money will just be replaced eventually, right? So it doesn't hurt anybody to fine a huge corporation like that, because it's just followed with more money coming in.
Yeah, and that's exactly right. And that's the position we find ourselves in. It's always just us resisting. So if you are part of the just us, you are not a millionaire, you are not somebody with income over $400,000, you are not part of the voting class within the party, Democrat, Republican, whatever, then you engaging in vote shaming is you being the heavy and allowing yourself to be used by them to coerce, intimidate, harass your fellow American. And you are the problem with our failed democracy.
Yes. So, and the other thing is, if Biden wins the presidency, right, the supporters of Biden basically just, what I guess the current thing is, they go to sleep and they make their brunch reservations and everything's all good again, and you pack your pussy protest hat into a box till the next time the Republicans come around, and nothing changes at all. Everything just goes back completely to normal. And right, and so those things that Trump was accused of that have happened, right, they continue to happen. The media just doesn't cover them.
Right. It'll just be a different set of voices out there diminishing the complaints, right? Instead of, the Huckabees, you're going to have the Stacey Abrams out there explaining to the public why these things are okay and why you shouldn't be upset about them. And, oh, these rebel rousers over there, they're just Russian plants or Russian bots or whatever else. So, yeah, I fully expect that. And this whole notion that you push people to the left after they're elected, I've seen it too many times where that doesn't happen. But we'll see if our latte liberals are going to be standing up for Black Lives Matter and all of these other really key issues under a Biden presidency or not. So, yeah. But those are my thoughts on vote shaming. If you want to weigh in, either after the fact or send us a message, let me know. Do you think that vote shaming is an effective tactic, and why? Or have you had an experience with vote shaming that you want to share? Please let us know. Drop your comments under the video, and maybe on Wednesday we'll get to it. So, any parting thoughts, Andy?
Just one, which was part of what you were talking about earlier about the number of mail-in ballots. And I found this actually very encouraging. And I'm not 100% sure what it means in terms of numbers, but we're talking about mail-in ballots in places like Texas and others that typically don't do those kind of things. There was a graphic that came out that showed the number of early voting, the amount of early voting from the age group of 18 to 25. And in 2016, the total, let's take Texas for an example, was about 44,000. And right now, for that age group, it's already well over 200,000. So you're talking about a factor of 5. Now, where are those votes going to go? That's the question, right? Are we talking about young people that are involved in places like the Sunrise Movement, right? Or any of those groups where they're tired of being marginalized in a generational way? Are they, like, you pretty much guarantee that the vast majority of them are not going to Trump. So does this mean that all these votes are going to Biden, or are they going third party? Right? And that will be very interesting.
And I've had a couple of people text me and say, what is your gut feeling on this? And I don't have one right now. I think the number of new registrants could lean towards Biden, but I also know that the MAGA folks are going to vote in person, and they're going to come out in full force too. So this is where you really need to sell the policy, not the other guy's bad, because I'm not going to vote necessarily the other guy is bad. Like I said, the ranchers, the cattle farmers, they don't give a shit about what affects somebody in Chicago or California or whatever. They don't care about California wildfires. They don't care about impoverished people in Chicago. They don't care about Baltimore or Florida or whatever else. They care that their personal family's wealth and their business has improved under policies that Trump has initiated to open up China to beef. That's what they care about. So you got to give them something else to sway their vote. Otherwise, they're not going to listen to you. They're just not. And this is where we're at. So yeah, and I think we need to do more on the MMT piece, because a lot of these arguments from the neoliberals and the neocons, they all fall away. And I think what is refreshing for me is it reveals that progressive policy is not far left. It is not socialism. It is not radical. It's fiscally sound, pragmatic policy.
Yeah, and it's just an explanation of how things work. Mm-hmm. People say, well, we can't implement MMT. Well, MMT isn't a system that you kick in. It's just a description of way things already work, right? They changed the system in the 70s. They just didn't change the textbooks. So nobody learned about it, right? That knowledge was there way before those times. They all knew how the financial system worked, right? That narrative went away because it was not worth it for the oligarchs in the society, for people to realize that a sovereign nation with its own currency is a currency issuer and can spend on the people. Why would I want the government to spend on the working class or the poor when I can, you have all the benefits of socialism for the rich, right?
Right. Well, we used to teach this in business management, and we stopped because the people above were spending too much money on their own taxes, and they wanted that narrative to stop. But as a business owner, we would talk about, if you take care of your employees, and it's not a big investment, it's just very small. And in fact, the entire field of human resources is built upon this principle. When you take care of your employees in very small, cost-effective ways, the return on that investment through cost avoidance and longevity and productivity is 10 to 20 fold per employee. And MMT takes that same philosophy and the ability to invest properly on a national scale. So the answer to the question is, am I my brother's keeper? Why do I care what's going on in Chicago and Baltimore and California and Florida? Is because when they are doing okay and they are not struggling to survive, we all profit. And that is the point. So Absolutely. It's pretty basic. But all right, Andy, I got to get out of here. Any final thoughts?
Nope, I think we've covered it all. We've fixed all the world's problems, so nothing to see here.
Okay, great. So I think we'll still be back Wednesday in case there are new problems that we need to solve. But...
Oh, I'm sure there'll be a whole litany of problems pop up between now and Wednesday, so we'll be back.
Excellent. All right, everybody, have a good start to your week. Happy Monday.
Take care.
We bout that, ayy. We in the zone, we out here, yeah. Spitting the facts, how it's supposed to be. Hair of the dog, we keep it in G. Whoa.